She was 7 years old, walking through one of the busiest airports in the country, and nobody noticed anything wrong. Not the security staff, not the travelers rushing past with their luggage and their coffee cups and their boarding passes. Not a single adult in that crowded terminal looked twice at the little girl moving quietly through the crowd, holding a woman's hand, her face completely still. No smile, no excitement, no energy at all, just silence. Just empty, hollow, terrifying silence from a child who should have been pointing at airplanes and asking for snacks. But one set of eyes caught it. One pair of senses, sharper than anything human, locked onto that little girl and refused to let go. Rex, a German Shepherd police dog with years of field experience behind him, went completely still in the middle of the terminal floor. His ears shot forward. His muscles turned to stone. And then the little girl did something so small, so carefully controlled, that not one person in that airport saw it happen. She reached out her free hand and tapped her sleeve 3 times. Slow, deliberate, a signal, a cry for help disguised as nothing at all. Rex reacted instantly, and what he uncovered in the next few minutes would leave every officer in that building completely speechless. This is the story of a child who found the only way she could ask for help, and a dog who was the only one brave enough to answer. It is a story about courage that arrives in the smallest possible movements. In 3 tapped fingers against a sleeve, in the steady gaze of a 7-year-old who had been told to stay silent and chose, in one terrifying moment, not to. It is also a story about what happens when the right pair of eyes, or the right pair of ears, or the right nose is pointed in the right direction at exactly the right time. Most people walked past that little girl and saw nothing unusual. Rex saw everything, and because Rex saw everything, 3 children made it home. Officer Daniel Reyes had worked airport security long enough to know that danger almost never announces itself. It doesn't come in wearing dark clothing or carrying suspicious bags. It comes wearing ordinary faces, moving in ordinary ways, hiding in plain sight inside the most normal-looking moments of a perfectly average morning. That knowledge, built over years of early shifts, crowded terminals, and thousands of faces scanned and cataloged, was what made Daniel one of the best officers in his department. But even Daniel would admit that the sharpest pair of eyes he had ever worked with belonged to Rex. The German Shepherd had been his partner for 3 years. He had saved Daniel's life during a nighttime warehouse raid, launching himself forward to knock Daniel aside, just as a hidden suspect swung a metal pipe out of the darkness. Since that night, Daniel had operated on a simple principle. If Rex reacted, Daniel acted. No questions. No hesitation. Rex could detect things no human instrument could measure. Fear, deception, adrenaline, the particular chemical signature that children's bodies released under extreme stress. He had never once given a false alarm in 3 years of service. So when Rex went still in the middle of the morning rush, body locked, ears forward, gaze fixed on a woman in a bright blue coat walking with 3 children, Daniel felt his pulse change. Not faster, slower, the way it always did right before something important happened. He gave Rex a quiet look and murmured 2 words. Show me. It was not a command. It was permission. Rex took 1 step forward. Slow, deliberate. His tail rose and went rigid. His gaze locked onto the smallest girl on the far right, the one with soft brown hair and eyes that kept darting backward with the intentional awareness of someone who had been told once by someone they loved that if the worst ever happened, a police dog was the one to find. The woman in the blue coat looked completely ordinary at first glance. 3 children. Brisk walk, blending perfectly into the morning chaos of a busy terminal. But the longer Daniel watched them, the more the details began to stack up in the wrong direction. The children didn't move like siblings. The woman pulled out her phone for a few seconds, her attention dropping. In that thin window of distraction, the little girl slowed her steps just half a pace and reached her hand back toward Rex, slow, careful, deliberate, and tapped him gently on the head. Rex reacted as if a current had passed through him. He rose, barked sharply, and pulled the leash taut. The woman spun around, and for one unguarded second, Real panic crossed her face before she pulled it back behind a shaky smile. Daniel was already moving. He stepped in front of the group, badge visible, voice calm. "Ma'am, I need you to stop walking for a moment." Rex circled the children, nose working the air around their coats, reading the invisible story of fear that their bodies were telling. The woman gripped her suitcase handle until her knuckles went white. "Officer, we're going to miss our flight." Rex growled, low, deep, a sound that came from somewhere serious inside him. The crowd nearby paused. Heads turned. Daniel held his position. She reached down and grabbed the little girl's wrist. Hard, the grip of someone asserting control rather than offering comfort. Daniel's voice cut through the air. "Let go of her hand." She released it immediately, and the little girl took one small step backward, pressing herself into Daniel's shadow. Rex moved with her without being asked, planting himself between the child and the woman like a wall that had made its decision. In that moment, watching a child hide behind a police officer and a dog position itself to protect her, Daniel knew with complete certainty that whatever was happening here, it was not a family running late for a flight. It was 3 children being moved by someone who had calculated that nobody pays attention to children in airports. A system built on guaranteed invisibility. What had not accounted for was Rex, and it had not accounted for a little girl whose father had once told her exactly what to do if the worst ever happened. Inside the private screening room, the fluorescent lights hummed quietly over a scene that grew heavier by the minute. The woman paced, complained, invented explanations. Rex stayed close to the children. Emma, a name the woman had let slip in a moment of sharp frustration, pressed her face into Rex's fur and held on. The boys stood near the wall with the hollow, careful stillness of children who had learned that showing emotion was dangerous. Daniel crouched to their level. "Do you all know this woman?" The woman cut in immediately. "Of course they do." Rex barked once, sharp and sudden, silencing her completely. Daniel turned to Emma. "Sweetheart, you can answer." Emma looked at him with eyes full of something that had been waiting a long time for permission. Then she shook her head, just once, slowly, but cracked the room open. The woman's composure shattered instantly. "She's lying," she shouted. "She's confused. She's tired." Emma flinched against Rex. Daniel raised one hand and stopped the outburst cold. Then the youngest boy whispered something barely audible. "My name isn't the one she says." And Emma, trembling but brave in a way that made every officer in the room go very quiet, told them everything. She had been separated from her grandparents near the vending machines. The woman had appeared, squeezed her arm, and told her to stay silent and keep walking. The boys had been taken in an identical stolen moment, the exact second their father's back was turned. All 3 had been warned that something bad would happen if they cried or called out. Rex pressed himself against the youngest boy's leg and stayed there, steady and warm, while the truth finally found its way into the light. The woman had stopped speaking. Every excuse had run out, and Rex stood quietly in the center of the room, watching everything with the calm certainty of an animal who had known from the very first moment exactly what was happening. Daniel stepped out to the security desk and requested 2 hours of camera footage from 3 separate gates. What came back on a monitor made his jaw tighten until it hurt. At Gate D, the woman appeared alone, checking her phone, scanning the hallway, positioning herself behind a pillar. At Gate B, Emma walked in with an older couple, tourists asking for directions, and the woman appeared beside them, placed her hand on Emma's shoulder as if she belonged to her, and walked away with the child while the couple stood confused. At Gate A, the 2 boys were with their father at a vending machine. The woman slipped into frame, pointed frantically at a flight counter, and the moment the man turned to look, she was already gone with his sons. 3 gates, 3 children, 3 stolen moments measured in seconds. Daniel walked back into the screening room, tablet in hand, footage paused on the screen. "You want to explain this?" The woman's breath caught. The detective who joined them recognized her face immediately. Hits from 2 other airports, same pattern, same method. She was part of an organized network operating across the country. They used stolen identities and fake family documents to move children between airports, where other members of the operation collected them. She whispered that she had been paid just to transport them to the next city, that someone else would pick them up, that she wasn't going to hurt anyone. Daniel's voice was quiet and final. You already did. You took them from their families. Rex growled once. Low, steady, the kind of sound that didn't need translation. 3 missing child reports have been filed in the past hour. Each child last seen with a different adult. The operation had run across multiple airports for months, moving children beneath security radar, dressed up as family travel. It had worked every time, until a German shepherd stopped and stared at a little girl who was desperately hoping someone would finally notice her. The families arrived within the hour. Emma's grandmother came through the door first, and the sound she made when she saw the little girl was not a word. It was something that existed before words, something that came from the deepest and most unguarded place inside a person who has spent hours believing the worst. She crossed the room in 3 steps and pulled Emma into her arms so completely that for a moment they became one shape, a grandmother and her granddaughter, holding each other the way people hold each other when they understand exactly how close they came to never having this moment. The boy's father followed seconds behind, and the moment his son saw him, he dropped to his knees on the hard floor and gathered them both in without a word. The youngest boy, who had barely spoken since the ordeal began, released Rex's fur for the first time and ran, threw himself forward with everything he had. Daniel stood at the edge of the room and let the reunions fill the space completely. These were the moments that made the hardest days worth showing up for. After a long while, Emma lifted her face from her grandmother's shoulder and found Daniel's eyes. She walked over to where Rex was lying quietly on the floor and sat down beside him, one hand resting in his fur. Officer Daniel, she said softly. He crouched beside her. She asked if he knew why she had touched Rex the way she did. He told her he had assumed she was trying to ask for help. Emma shook her head. My dad taught me, she said. Her voice caught slightly on the word dad. Before he died, he used to work with police dogs, and he told me that if someone scary ever took me, I should signal the dog. Because dogs don't get fooled. They always know when a child needs help. She paused. Rex had known. He had known from 30 feet away, in the middle of a rushing crowd, before a single word had been spoken or a single signal given. He had simply looked at her and understood. And he had not looked away. Rex lifted his head from the floor and rested it gently on Emma's knee, as if he had always known, as if he had been listening to her father's instructions from the very beginning and had simply been waiting for the right moment to act on them. Daniel felt the back of his throat tighten with something he didn't try to name. You were so brave, he told her. Your dad would be so proud of you right now. Emma smiled, a real smile, full and warm and reaching all the way to her eyes, for the first time since Daniel had seen her. Rex saved us, she said quietly, just like my dad promised the dog would. Her grandfather placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder and thanked him. But Daniel shook his head and looked down at his partner, lying calm and still on the floor with a child's hands in his fur. He did it, Daniel said. I just followed him. And that was the truth. Rex had seen what every other person in that airport had missed. He had locked onto a little girl's silent cry and refused to let it go. He had stood between children and danger without hesitation and without instruction, guided by instincts that no amount of human training could fully explain or replicate. 3 children went home that day. 3 families were made whole again. And a scam network that had been operating across airports for months began to unravel from a single thread. A dog who stopped, stared, and would not look away. Emma hugged Rex one last time before they left, pressing her face into his neck, whispering something too quiet for anyone else to hear. Rex closed his eyes. His tail moved once, slow and certain, the kind of movement that said everything without needing words. Daniel watched his partner lying on the floor with a child's hands in his fur. Some mornings a dog locks his eyes on a little girl and refuses to look away. Everything depends on whether the person holding the leash is paying attention. Daniel had been. Rex had done the rest.